very good evening to Capital Sports 3.0, and I am delighted to say that very shortly I'm going to introduce to my co-host for this evening. Of course, my name is Alan Moore, just in case you've forgotten. I hope you're all well and enjoying the end of, well, it's a dry summer for most places, but I know that in some parts of Europe it has been raining a lot, and parts of the States as well. So what have we got to talk about this evening? Well, there's an awful lot has happened this past week to, I would say, future, like they're kind of already getting there, but two future legends of their sports, both officially kind of retired. One backtracked on his retirement plan or what he'd said just a few days before, but he is now done. And thus, of course, that is Tyson Fury. Of course, Serena Williams also retired. We're going to have a proper segment on her as well. We also have a bit of golf because the live golf, as we've covered here on the show before, has increased in tempo, increased in level of players, and it looks like the world number 2 is going there as well. We're going to discuss that in just one moment. And we also brought up a fairly difficult issue last week about trans athletes playing in sports, especially men who transition into women playing in women's sports. Of course, there was a huge case last week, or the week before last, I should say now, in Gaelic football in Dublin. And we covered that fully. We took a few hits over because people said, no, we didn't give the full facts. We actually did, and we actually tried to be as positive as possible. The LGFA, the Ladies Gaelic Football Association, they have already begun work on how to cater for people who are, as we say, like non-binary or so on and so forth. And right afterwards, the Irish Rugby Football Union banned transgender athletes. So men who now identify who have become women, they're not allowed to play in the women's game. So start off straight away. I will introduce my co-host for this evening, Isel Cody, looking great as ever, and Pyre Derwin, welcome all the way from the south of France. I'll start with Isel. Isel, how was your week?
My week has been very good, topped off by a fantastic draw for Spurs today. So it's been a good week. The fact that I'm celebrating a draw may perhaps give a nod to how Spurs' performance was. It was typically Spursy, but we're celebrating it anyway. And we've had a lovely week of heat in Ireland, which none of us are prepared for or able for.
Well, of course, the let's just say the post-match schmozzle, as we say in Ireland, between the two coaches was actually very interesting, between Tuchel and Conte. But, I still think Conte would do him. I still think Conte has the measure of him.
Conte would fight so much dirtier. Or do you mean in actual performance as a manager?
Both.
Both. I didn't like it at all. I think even if it was the other way around, I did not like it. I thought there was something so pig ignorant about hanging on to someone's hand. Everything was inappropriate about it. Yeah. And yeah,
it was silly. It was childish. Like, I mean, you expect better, but Byron, you're down in the south of France. How has your week been, and how are your holidays going?
Well, that makes it sound very energetic. I just say about Conte knowing Isolt's favourite sport, there would be the final Conte down between the two of them.
I like it.
But moving on very quickly. Well, I started the week in Birmingham, wrapping up the Commonwealth Games, and my esteemed colleague John, who some people would have seen, loved my company so much he had a big hippo-like yawn behind me at the Athletics, which about sums up my sense of humour, etc. And then I've just taken a few days, what they call R&R, and back to the coalface, if there is one left in the whole of Europe, at the middle of the week. But if I can quickly say, I don't know if I can, but the Commonwealth Games, I know, people say, bloody hell, what is it, really? But it was pretty extraordinary. And to have 10 sun-kissed days in Birmingham, I don't think I've ever, even if Benny in his woolly hat had said that until he disappeared off a ladder in Crossroads, I don't think anyone would have bet on that. And I have to say, there were some amazing stories that came out of it. And if we have the time, I devote one, apart from Golden Delicious Ori, of course, Isolt. But he was fantastic within the limits of the competition. But there's one particular story that I'd like to come back to if we have the time.
No, we will. I'll tell you what. We'll stick it in the end of our new segment. So we'll do especially for that. So that's I'm good with that.
Great, thank you.
As I mentioned, we have a lot to cover. We have, of course, Serena retiring, Tyson Fury retiring as well. Isa's going to cover that in her hot topic. The live golf, it is growing. It is really, really growing. And of course, transgender bands, as I said, Pirate is on board with us. So I'm going to start off. I'll try to get this up now because I had a bit of a nightmare this evening trying to get everything done on time. But here we go. So this is a man with one of the best mullets in the game of golf. And Cameron Smith, I mean, he's an interesting character, but Isa, it looks like he's going to move to live golf, or at least it seems to be.
Yeah, so I suppose the writing with Cam Smith has been on the wall for a few weeks. Basically, after some of the more recent tournaments, when he's been asked questions about it, he's been quite evasive in terms of what he wants to say. I think it was actually after the Open in particular. Obviously, his countryman Greg Norman is heavily involved with Liv, and I suppose there's a certain inevitability about Cam Smith being targeted, not only because he's the world number 2, but also because of the fact that he's Australian. Cam Smith is a very interesting character, and I think he has taken, whenever he's been interviewed about this and are queried during interviews, he's been quite staunch in his not willing to engage on the discussion point. So that obviously set alarm bells ringing for a lot of people. We now have a case being taken as well against the PGA. So everything has gotten very spicy in terms of where things are going to go with live golf. Because the reality is, live golf isn't going away. It's a question of which players go there and at what point we say, do we want other tournaments to suffer? In the sense that we've seen what's happened with the Ryder Cup. Do the PGA want the world number 2 to be at a different, not be able to participate in their competitions? And I think the reality is there's going to have to, at some point, be some sort of truce between the two competitions. The reality is sports goes to wherever money is, and that's always going to happen. You can't play the high horse with it.
No, you're right on that. I mean, it is, as you mentioned, like there's players, the FedEx Championships going on at the moment, FedEx Cup in, say, June in Memphis, and players were banned by the PGA from competing. So it's not a good situation. Of course, court case is pending. They've lost some of them, and one of the judges had said that, if it's about money, you're missing out money. Why are you worrying about playing in a tournament where you're going to pick up trophies, or you're just going to gather the dust? That's kind of, I'm paraphrasing, that's basically it. Pirate, do you think that it's right that the PGA does this, or do you think that there has to be some common ground found between the players and the PGA?
Well, I think, like it sort of says, I mean, when you're starting to lose, at the beginning there was some, shall we say, ones that you might say were in the rough for the rest of their careers, or as in age, etc., and maybe seen the best days have passed them. But now, if you get Cam Smith, who's a recent major winner and he's only 28, going, it might be a tipping point. Much as one might disagree with the whole scenario, sort of jazzy it up, etc., and the paymasters. But it may come to it that the PGA have to kind of, reach a compromise. I mean, the Ryder Cup could become a total farce, I mean, you strip one man of the captaincy of the European team, and yet, I mean, the irony, is it possible? His form isn't great, but if he qualified as a player, that would be problematic. And I don't know. I mean, I think it's been an embarrassment to watch the press conferences of people like Westwood and Poulter and Paul Casey, who'd been a staunch critic of the regime only a few years ago, and scrabbling around to say, oh, well, it's like this and that, and we've got to look after our families. Well, they're not exactly people who are, at the bottom end of the rung. I can understand journeyman golfers saying, blimey, yeah, I'll take that. I can totally understand that. And the only thing I would say is it a Packer moment? Like when Kerry Packer basically revolutionized cricket, and everyone said, oh my God, this is not, it's not whites and all that. But in fact, if you look at it, Packer did it for the benefit of the game. And to be fair to cricket, it's evolved ever since, whether you agree with the 100 or the T20 or whatever. It's constantly evolving. And you could put that back to when Packer provoked this sort of wind, change of wind, etc. My only worry would be that it might stretch into tennis eventually.
Oh,
So answering back, well, I mean, are there any other sports you could look at and say, hey, that's got potential? And Djokovic is always disagreeing quite a lot of what the ATP say, and okay, Federer and Nadal don't, but there's a certain wave of opinion that would say, well, we're a bit staid, we're a bit this, but that's for another day, obviously, and I apologize for throwing that in. But I think going back finally to answer your actual question, I think yes, I think there'd have to be compromise because the way things are going, it's just the money is just well, no matter what the PGA do. Now Norman, who one would tend to agree with Woods on many things about his personality. But Norman did say the other day, look at the PGA and their sponsors and how much their sponsors do business with Saudi Arabia. So, I mean, I wouldn't want to agree with too much of what he's done or said, but you could say he had a point there. So there'll have to be a meeting of minds, I think, there, essentially.
No, I agree on that. And I think that if they say the players can't play, surely that would be some sort of a legal issue in terms of, an employment law. He said, would that be the case? I mean, that they're sort of not being allowed to work simply because they're working somewhere else?
It comes down to what the rules of participation in a tournament would be. So it's like your right to enter a bar. You could have rules which govern how you get in. And I suppose by taking cases, it's testing the basis upon which the PGA are seeking to exclude. My difficulty is I always find it, and I think this is across the board, I find it very difficult where people are inferring their right to participate in everything. And I think I have that view a lot across a lot of things. I think tournaments need to be able to have rules, as we all know. We're going to get to that topic later. Tournaments need to be able to have rules to protect the sanctity of what they want to produce as a competition. I just think we're getting to a stage now where there needs to be almost like an adult moment where everyone goes, neither are going away. I might not, and I think Pirate has put it so well. I'd like the big issue I have had with Live to date has been not how they're changing the game. We don't know whether in 10 years' time we'll look back and go, that's great. It's people like, actually for me, it was Graham McDowell, his comments. I just found it really galling. And I think you can take the money if you want, but please don't tell us that the regime has changed because you want to take the money. And that's the issue for me.
If you just simply say, look, I'm playing golf. I'm here to talk about golf. I'm here to play golf.
Yeah.
Where the money comes from, I understand it. I accept it. But you know what? And probably brought it up. If I'm playing on like XYZ or in the tour, and one of the sponsors is, for example, BlackRock, or a weapons manufacturer, or even McDonald's, which does business in Saudi Arabia. It's kind of a catch-22, and I always put my hands up and say, look, I worked for 2 years in Saudi Arabia. I can't turn around and say, oh no, I wouldn't do that, I wouldn't that, because no, I did it because it was a job. I went and I worked and I came back. Okay, it's very different to what like Brooks Koepka or Bryson DeChambeau gets, but like at the same time, it's a bit so. Pirate, in that sense, like I mean, you of course you're based in France, and do you see? Because if we look at, say, the way French sport is, you see a PSG owned by Qatar. And I mean, it's not alone in terms of clubs are owned by sort of strange people in the world of football, especially. But you think that ultimately the fans don't care. They just want to go see good golf, good tennis, good football.
PSG is a moot point there. No, I'm joking, but just in the overall competition, domestically speaking. But yes, I do think fans ordinarily, want to go and see sport at the highest level. Do they care much about the background to it? Well, I mean, I'm not sure I can't speak about the crowds that were in the Live tournaments in America, but I believe the one in England was not any great shakes. That's not a play on words either, by the way. But I don't know, because, if I can bore you again, but with the Commonwealth Games, for instance, there you were, you'd honestly admit there was no Fraser Price, there was no Sherika Jackson, there was no Cheptegei. in the distance races, and every day, and I can tell you 2 of the nights had only about 2 finals. Well, they had 5 finals, sorry, 3 para and 2, able body, and they packed it out, and maybe that's something very unique to England or whatever, but there were 30,000 people in the stadium morning and night. So I think in a way that does answer your question, that people will pay to go and go and watch top level sports. Whether they have moral reservations about it, yeah, they may do. But if you want to go and see your Cam Smiths and your Kupkers, etc., not necessarily the McDowells nowadays, they're going to do it. They really will, and you can't blame them for that. And I suppose this is what our live backers are looking at, I guess. I mean, I would imagine, although the money to them is, a drop in the sand, I guess. But so people will go and see whatever they like. I mean, there's some countries, I think you'd say they'd watch 2 drops of rain race each other down a window and still watch it. So, anyway, whether they're backed by Saudi Arabia or by, Qatar, I do not know. But in France, I mean, I would say though in France, yeah, and that's the funny thing is sort of like handball would be very well attended, and sometimes better attended percentage-wise than a League One match. I mean, a PSG will always be packed out, and PSG, Marseille, etc. But so they got their idiosyncrasies, and so that's that.
Okay,
I hope I answered the question.
No, you answered fully. You both answered your question. So we're the second one that we're going to say, because we're going to cut our news short this evening. We get into them, and this is about transgender athletes and we say in rugby and football, Gaelic football, that we've covered the last few weeks here, or last few shows. Megan Rapinoe, of course, very outspoken, the American football superstar. She has been very, very, I would say, fair about it. She's been kind of misrepresented. I'm not a huge fan of hers for some of the things she comes out with, because she'll tell one thing and then contradict herself, and then if you pull her up on it, then she'll just shout even louder. But at the same time, on this, she's got something to say. And her exact statement is, I'm 100% supportive of trans inclusion. People do not know very much about it. We're missing almost everything. Frankly, I think a lot of people, what a lot of people know is versions of the right's talking points, because they're very loud, they're very consistent, and they're relentless. Now, what she was saying was that at the highest level, collegiate sports, there's regulation, Olympic and professional, there's regulation, which said where the problems come in, it's lower down in amateur sport. Now, we spoke about that last week. There was a case about the Italian Giulia Valentino, who was playing junior Gaelic football, ladies Gaelic football in Ireland, and there was an uproar over it, and the IRFU then banned transgender athletes, transgender women, from competing in women's rugby. Bart, is this something we're going to have to deal with? That, I mean, does Megan have a point that it's actually lower down where it needs to be regulated even further?
Yeah, I would say so, because, like it or not, there could be some serious injuries for a start. In the difference in, like the case you highlighted earlier, there wasn't serious injury, but it was evident that the physique was vastly different. There could be that, with obviously the necessary understanding, etc., because it is a very delicate topic. I mean, there also has to be, blimey, I mean, there's a challenge there also for acceptance, isn't there? I mean, lower down, because there's less oversight and remarks could be made or whatever it is on the other side of things. I mean, I don't know. I mean, I think in the ultra physical sports, it's a big problem. I don't think Isil would know, but I don't know if that's happened in boxing at all. But I know in weightlifting, obviously it did, because at the Olympics last year, there was the Kiwi who competed. I just think, yes, I mean, Rapinoe's got a point, definitely, because maybe from that smallish area, A, understanding can grow, and B, maybe lots of other things can be learned as well about the physical aspect, between, a tackle or whatever. Or, I think there's two things there, to be honest, because it's quite, it's an emotive subject. And sometimes, as she said, I think, people do sort of spark off about it without a huge amount of knowledge. I mean, it takes a lot of educating too.
This is it. And I mean, our video from last week, we put up the clip it's good. Well, a lot of people comment on this, like it's most commented on video that we've done. And I was surprised, and it was because a lot of people picked up on it and said that we were very, very fair in our discussion. We and the duty of care has to be in general. It can't be just, let's protect the girls.
No, of course.
It's also protecting the physical and mental health of the people who are transgender as well, because again, people go, we do know that there are greater difficulties at for example, the rate of suicide amongst people who are transgender is quite high. So we have to look after that as well. So the decision taken by the IRFU, that kind of plays into what Megan's speaking about. It's at the highest level, but now it's gone all the way down to club rugby as well.
Yeah, so I suppose even this week we've had some of the teams in Ireland have come out and been quite vocal in their complaints about it, in the sense that they feel that straight away we're pushing against inclusivity, which I understand exactly where Megan's coming from and saying, we know so much at the highest levels of elite sport, but what we're doing once we start to have blanket bans on the lower levels is we breed a culture of never having inclusivity at any level. But, and this is, I suppose, where I think there has to be a distinction drawn. The IRFU have also cited repeatedly that they are going on what's based on the best available scientific advice to them, etc. It is also a contact sport. And I think there is always going to be that difference. And we need to look at, if we say, let's say you're playing at the elite games, at elite level, you have elite support services there. So if you start going down through the ranks, at what stage do you get concerned about the fact that inclusivity, for the optics of inclusivity, can lead to risk? As Pirate said, you don't know what unnecessary risks you may be exposing someone to. Now, then again, by the same token, you can say, you might have a much larger cis woman participating in sport, and she may cause injury to a scrum half who is by their physical nature smaller. But it's more so about, we need to look at how policies aren't designed to exclude, but they're including while being safe for the existing participants. When it comes to boxing, Pirate having mentioned it, I do know that there's some very well-known female boxers, so the likes of Savannah Marshall, who spars with men. Now, she's also coached by Gypsy John Fury, so, sparring with men doesn't seem like the strangest thing to have on in that camp. But she spars with men, but she's not fighting them. She's sparring with headgear on. It's part of her training. She also spars with women. And the difference is, if you had a heavyweight woman in a ring with a heavyweight man, there's only one result there. No matter what you do, short of giving them a knife, it's only going one way. And I think we need to, as viewers of sport, people love, the whole point of viewers of sport is you love participation, but participation can't just have no consequences if there are risks to the participants. You just need to look at it sport by sport, case by case. In terms of elite and amateur level, maybe you might have different policies, but everything needs to be looked at, and the onus now is on every sport, be it contact sports, non-contact sports, to have a policy. There's no excuse not to.
I'll add on that in terms of having a policy, even though in Russia, for example, it's not recognized as an issue, not accepted. It's just not recognized. It's not an issue. However, I do know that in ice hockey, there already have been discussions about, as we said last week, sort of an other or a separate kind of division or league, because they said they've had these issues, and also that in Sweden the discussion has been there about how to make this category, because again, there's trans players who want to play ice hockey but they can't play with women. they don't want to play with men, so it's kind of trying to balance it out. Quick question for both of you before we go away from this. I'll just stick with you on this and then ask Pirate. In terms of the women, I mean, you're a woman, I know, so that's why I'm asking you first on this. What would be the view of women? Because what I've always said is, why are women not asked if they want to vote on it or take a decision? Because ultimately it's their sport.
I think the strange thing is, I know I differ, my views differ to a good few of my own friends. I think there is a fear that if you are a cis woman, obviously there are some athletes, Sharon Davies, etc., who are very vocal, but if you have a view that isn't inclusive, you will be viewed as being almost detracting from, or you're anti-trans, and then the pylons start online, as we've all seen. So there's almost a sense of cis women not giving a view either way for fear of the consequences of having a view that isn't necessarily found to be on point. You see what Megan has done. It's great for Megan to be able to have a platform to say this, but she has strong views on a lot of things and she's very vocal in them, and she's not risking a pylon in the way that some women saying, actually, I'd prefer to not have a trans man coming up against a trans woman now coming up against me on a football field, for example. Straight away you're piled on, and that's the concern. I think that your views aren't as valid because you are a cis woman, and it's a tough one. It's catch-22 at this stage.
Now, again, I didn't want to put you into a situation. I just asked you to speak about it because it is the case that even...
No, I think it's the fear is that you will be labelled a TERF, essentially, no matter what if you express a negative view to inclusivity, you're obviously discriminating, as opposed to you might be thinking, if this was me and I'm on that team, do I feel safe?
Listen, I got the same when I said that there should be no youth boxing under the age of 16. And the reason I gave was medical, based on medical. At 16, the skull is fully formed, the brain is ready to go. Don't have kids punched in the head from the age of 9 the whole way up. Because when I met a guy in Germany and I was in ring across from him, and he told me he had 70 fights. He was only 19 and he had 70 fights already on his card. I was thinking that is just so unhealthy. And yet when I said that, I was hammered. I was like, oh, like how dare you don't understand boxing. I'm like, okay. Pirate, question to you as well. I mean, a lot of men have come in on this, and even I saw on the comments, they're thinking like, well, it's a man playing against women. That's very unfair. But do you think as well that if men speak out about it, for example, if they've daughters, if they've got wives, or speaking what they would see as common sense, is that not allowed in this case?
Oh, no, I think they are, I mean, I don't see why they shouldn't be allowed, because can't you have it the other way that, some women transition into male, etc. So why can't the men also comment on that? Admittedly, there are less cases of it, but in sports anyway. But no, I think, there has to be a debate that involves everybody. That's the very nature of inclusivity, isn't it, as well? That the debate has to be inclusive to have a genuine all-round feel to it. I know that these days that, well, as we all know, that you can say one comment and you're jumped on immediately because, oh, why are you saying that? Because, you've never done it, or but I don't think that's I think everyone's entitled, provided it's civilized, provided it's, sometimes educated. I don't see why men can't comment on it, because it's a very involving debate about sports. We haven't been stopped in the past and commenting on, I don't know, women's boxing or whatever, which is a very high level. But what I mean is, you can't stop people from having having a word to say about it. I don't think you can stop one sex from commenting about the other, if you see what I mean. I think also some of their comments might be extremely constructive. I hope, anyway. But no. So I would say an all-involving, all-inclusive debate, and a civilized one.
Yeah, I'm with you on that because you can be emotional, you can put your point forward. And I was just saying this to my son there on Friday about discussing things, and he would say, "Oh, these people are stuck in the Soviet mentality." And I'm going, "Yeah, but that's your point of view. But listen to
Mm,
their point of view. Just listen. You don't have
mm,
to force it down their throat." And I heard this. This goes back to Saudi Arabia from a sheikh who used to, he preach, I guess you could say, in Mecca on a Friday,
hmm
and he said, "I am happy. You believe, yeah, as you believe." He said, "And I'll speak with you about it, and I'll speak about my beliefs." He said, "And you know what? We'll walk away as friends and say thank you very much." And I said, "Oh, okay, yeah, well, fair enough." And he said, "Because your beliefs stop at the end of my nose. What it goes behind my nose is my brain. You can't touch that." So
mm.
in that case, yeah, I do think there has to be a discussion on that. And okay, what we're going to do is we do have a couple of messages. No, Isa had sent in a message. Oh, United empty. Okay, we'll go on to that. Isa, thank you. The US. We're going to go out to a very, very short break for a moment. Then coming back, we're discussing about Serena Williams. So back in just 30 seconds. Okay, we are back, and you probably see there in the bottom of the screen scrolling across. Of course, Pirate, he is an acclaimed author, and I'm going to ask him about that as well because I've spoken about it on the radio with him before. His series of novels is really, really good. It's unstoppable in terms of reading because you really, really just once you get reading, you keep going. And I've turned on quite a few people to them as well. They've actually got them on Kindle versions, and I was actually making a mistake, and instead of saying Kindle versions, I was saying the Tinder versions, and and everyone was laughing. And then I said, "No, maybe it's not Tinder, it's Grindr." And it's like, "No, Alan, stop."
Stop, Alan, stop.
Yeah.
Stop it
Oh
now.
my god. That's why I got so many strange messages.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's like, what did I download on my phone?
Yeah. It was that there were a few swipe lefts, or was it swipe rights? But whatever it
very
was.
popular.
Yeah.
I got a lot of new friends, a
Yeah.
lot of messages. I didn't
Well,
even
I'm very appreciative of that. And you never know, it might go down as Scream as a date on Tinder anyway, just on the Farage and his cognac drinking. So more than me.
Why not? I
Yeah.
mean, it's a modern update. It's a modern update of
Exactly.
classic
Exactly.
era.
Nothing better for him. He needs to grow up a bit.
Okay, so our talking point of the week will be about Mrs. Serena Williams, who announced her retirement this week. Very much a divisive figure in many ways, but also someone who has done a huge amount of good for, I'd say, sport. And also, I will say this, that I know people who've dealt with her on a personal basis in terms of like with charity, with kids. She gives endless time. Everyone, so many of these people who are like, even Cristiano Ronaldo, they just, when they have the time, they're very happy to give it. And Serena is one of them. Now, in retiring, she's left, as I said, she's left behind a kind of a divided legacy, some really good, some really bad. I'm going to just put a small, couple little pieces on this. I'm going to end off on a high with this. But before I ask my co-hosts about this situation, this is some not good kind of memories that we'll have, unfortunately, of Serena.
On the second serve, gives Kim Clijsters 2 match points. That is unbelievable. Is that necessary? That shot's not going to show us. But that's to bring up match point. That is extraordinary. And Serena Williams is giving it to her.
Well, she'll have to be careful here. She's already had a warning for racket abuse.
Well, here we go.
And this
could be trouble. Well, I think this is really indicative of Serena's night, isn't it?
If she gets a warning, it's point penalty, game, set, match.
Okay, that of course was quite a few years ago in the US Open when she was disqualified Sure, he got racket warnings for abuse for warnings for racket abuse, and then she threatened a Lions person. Now she had done that before, but not in the way she did then when she really lost it. Now there was a lot of girls in the locker room had said, and speaking with them, one Serena Kuznetsova said that she did that deliberately so she didn't lose, because to lose on her own service, having just served a double fault, would just destroy her completely. So she wanted to be kicked out rather than to be pushed out. But on that, I mean, Serena, will she qualify as the greatest of all time? And where would you rank her in the greatest of all time rankings?
Wow. You could say that because Margaret Court hasn't exactly been uncontroversial herself. You were saying about Gaston that he's a bit old-fashioned, etc., and she maybe has old-fashioned views. And Serena would, well, in the professional era, she has to be on Grand Slams. But can you compare her to when Steffi Graf was competing, when Navratilova and Evert? Was it a stronger competition as well? You know, because it seemed to be. It went backwards and forwards a fair bit. And I think, no, she's remarkable. And I think her work on charities is extraordinary. And yes, there will always be the video films. And her thing with Osaka and the umpire was probably unforgivable to a certain extent because it took the glory from Osaka. But on the other side, yeah, I mean, she's a phenomenon, really. And I'd put her alongside Navratilova probably.
Oh, okay. That is very, very high ranking. And again, like you said, we'll play that in a moment, this sort of situation with Osaka, because that was just a terrible moment. You know,
I preempted it.
Yes, and perfectly so. Perfectly so. Part you did it before on radio, and it was ideal. It was really, really good. And this is the situation where she has done so much, won so much on court, but then also seemed to lose it. Isolde, I mean, just in terms of the situation even around her own family life, I mean, we commented on the movie that was made about her father and the whole development. I mean, it was very much sanitized. Do you think that should reflect on her as a player, or should we just look only at what she did in the court?
I think in this day and age, I think she's so much more and so much bigger than just a tennis player. And I think that's a huge consideration when you look at someone's legacy. As you pointed out rightly with things like the charity work, her celebrity is such mass appeal that it's not necessarily just about her prowess on the court. I think if she'd won less Grand Slams, she'd still be as big a personality on a global scene. The other thing, I suppose, is from the perspective of a mother, her returning to tennis after having her child is a huge thing, because it gives a different legacy as well, where people go, okay, you can return to the top level of elite sport and proceed to win. She's also suffered some ridiculously bad defeats, in the sense that her ability wasn't in any way reflected in, sometimes she'd go out and you'd feel like she was losing to considerably lesser opponents. And it would go wrong, and you'd kind of be there going, she has so much potential, and she'd be able to come back from those sort of defeats where other people may have walked away from the sport at a different time. And I think everything has been done very much on her terms, in the sense that she could have kept going with the intention of trying to get ahead of Margaret McCourt. She may not necessarily have done so, but this is very much her retirement on her terms, her announcing it, and her going into the US Open as her last Open. So every bit of focus is going to be on her. And what way that pans out, obviously we'll all wait to see. But I think Serena and Venus they're as well known outside the tennis sphere as they are in it, and that's an amazing achievement.
And they had their fair amount of tragedy as well. Sorry, Alan.
Yeah.
With one of their sisters, wasn't she shot dead as well?
Exactly.
And,
Exactly.
you know, it's an extraordinary strength of character. And I mean, as Izzle very rightly pointed out too, I mean, she came back from having a baby, and it was pretty tough as well, I believe, from what I read of what she said about it this week or last week. And she still got to 3-4 Grand Slam finals, and she didn't quite get over the line. But still, to do that is extraordinary. And at her age, I mean, with I speak being considerably older, but at that level of professional sport, quite extraordinary. You may say it's something to do with what she leaves behind in terms of the players, but you can only, as that cliche goes, beat what's out there. So, a phenomenon.
I also think we do need to. I can see someone has obviously commented and said focusing on one negative incident shouldn't take away from all she's done. The difficulty is it isn't just one incident, and we, like those of us who lock ourselves in panic rooms for fear of testers, can't really come down on their high horses saying everything.
No, and not just once. Not just
and
once.
The thing is, the reality is, there were the leaks as well as to what levels of various therapeutic use exemptions she was getting. But her legacy is still, we're not saying she's a tarnished athlete. You just have to look at the person as a whole and what they do, whether their conduct is sometimes off or not. Like, if everyone was to look at how my behaviour is over the course of a week, they'd be like, well, she's tarnished from Monday through to Sunday. But, it's part of the person, and I think you can't ignore it. We're not focusing on one aspect. We're looking at the overall. For me, she has made tennis a more accessible sport across the world for people.
I agree. I mean, there were, groundbreaking athletes in tennis who were coloured, for example, from the state team with Chandler Rubin and Zena Garrison Jackson. They were, very, very strong, top 50, top 20 world tour players. So, Venus and Serena weren't the first. However, they came sort of fully formed straight into pro tennis. I remember watching their debuts. They were just unbelievably good. The father, Richard, said that he wasn't going to let them play junior tennis because it would burn them out. And he was dead right. I actually agree fully with what he said, because I've seen so many young players do well at junior level, and by the time they go to play pro, their shoulders falling off, their knees are gone, because they're very good at 16, 17 years of age, but they haven't been developed through their growth spurts and so on. And in terms of that, we'll just as one, in terms of her, we'll play the Naomi one, because I think it's an interesting one. I think just to show that it's not just once, but again, separating this from the athlete is important. So we'll just have a little look at that kind of condensed incident, which really, kind of upset a lot of people.
Code violation, coaching, warning, Mrs. Williams.
If he gives me a thumbs up, he's telling me to come on. We don't have any code, and I know you don't know that, and I understand why you may have thought that was coaching, but I'm telling you it's not. I don't cheat to win. I'd rather lose. I'm just letting you know.
Game, Osaka. Violation, racket abuse, point penalty, Mrs. Williams.
You owe me an apology. I have never cheated in my life. I have a daughter and I stand what's right for her, and I've never cheated. And you owe me an apology. You owe me an apology. You will never, ever, ever be on another court of mine as long as you live. You are the liar. And you stole a point from me. You're a thief too.
Code violation, verbal abuse, game penalty, Mrs. Williams.
No, I don't know the risk, because if I say a simple thing, a thief because he stole a point from me, that does not make, there are men out here that do a lot worse, but because I'm a woman. Because I'm a woman, you're going to take this away from me?
So Serena's case was that, or she said that because she's a woman, she got a game taken away, a code violation. I just thought the umpire was so stereotypical a referee. You say something to him and he's listening, he's being calm, and then you say, right, like, ref, you're a cheat. And he goes, yellow card. It's just, and her behavior, because she, the crowd were booing her on Osaka, it was a terrible situation. But I mean, also in France, how is Serena viewed? Because she has a kind of a mixed legacy. She was very, very good at Roland Garros, You know, I think she won it 3 times, but was never as dominant as, say, Wimbledon or the US Open. But what do French fans think of Serena?
Not as warmly as Wimbledon, and certainly not the US Open would think of her. Yeah, I just don't think there's the same. How would I put it? Yeah, they don't have the same feelings towards her as the other majors would have. Although I would say that they're a very fickle audience, because Mary Pierce, okay, she was Canadian French, but she won Roland Garros, and then I don't know, it was about a year later, and she was flunking it in an early round match, and they just jeered her. So they're a very fickle bunch. So their estimation of Serena, I don't think she'll be losing any sleep over. I mean, there'd be great respect for her, obviously, for those who think outside of just, what she's done at Roland Garros, etc. But I don't think you'd get the same warmth of reception or farewell as you would in Wimbledon or Flushing Meadow.
Okay.
With all due respect to Melbourne. And if I could just say one thing, only because I came across it a few weeks ago, Althea Gibson was the real, she was a genuine pathfinder for, at a very, very difficult time, when it was even before civil rights really took off, etc. And, it's understandable that her name gets lost in the past to a certain extent, but she was a remarkable tennis player and person in many respects, and abuse she had to put up with was quite astonishing. Nothing. I mean, whatever the Williamses have experienced, which has probably not been good at times, is nothing compared to what Gibson had to put up with. And even to be remembered was hard enough by certain authorities.
Yeah, and I apologize. I actually
there's no apology.
I was thinking of Arthur Ashe, and I didn't think of Althea. So it's true. Isel, you mentioned this with in terms of the panic room and so on. I mean, there were so many issues when, for example, Fancy Bears, released what she'd been taking. How she got backdated TUEs, and she argued that they weren't backdated, that they were on time. But even USADA, the USA Anti-Doping, said, well, no, there were some difficulties, and then we didn't receive the documents on time. But look, that happens. I've seen it happen. It's a very simple clerical error, but it's kind of not excused, but it's noted down. Of course, the decision with the panic room, and then more recently when she, refused to let testers in and so on. Do people ask questions about that enough, or do we just kind of say, okay, well, she was brilliant on the court, we'll let it slide?
I find it so funny when we watch back that clip, the Osaka clip. I'd completely forgotten. I remembered the umpire when I remembered her saying to me she'd never be on one of her courts again. I also remembered him looking and waiting until she was a safe distance away before saying that he was doing the game forfeit. But what I had forgotten in all of that was the level of aggression that was directed at him. And when you watch that back, you kind of go, I had glossed over that. I remember it, but I glossed over it. And I think maybe Serena potentially has stuff glossed over in a way that she said it's because she's a woman. Nick Kyrgios, everyone instantly associates him with his aggression and his temper tantrums. People forget that sometimes Andy Murray can be an absolute pain in the you-know-what when he's on a court. Djokovic, his temper tantrums maybe get a bit more recognition. But Serena, we have specific incidents, but we often overlook it. And I think that's possibly the same with things like the panic room incident. And when you look back at the various TUEs, like there's a certain amount of glossing over that. And I think that also comes down to the fact that not just because she's female, but because she has become, to an extent, a cultural icon. Even things like how she dressed on the court has changed how generations now dress on the court. There's more of a, they're there and they're making a show of like, this is how she dresses. It doesn't matter if it's against what the tennis norm used to be. And I think to an extent we do gloss over it with her. Even the coverage of her retirement was via Vogue, I think. That's how she announced it. She wasn't going by her own website. It was like, she's that level of icon. And as a result, we don't ask the questions we sometimes do. And perhaps, dare I say it, because she's a woman, she also might not have as many questions asked as if she was a male tennis player who hid in panic rooms, which I imagine would cause more of a question to be asked. But like,
Uh,
I don't. I don't have a panic room, but if someone knocks on my front door, my instant reaction isn't to release the hounds.
well, you should probably, but I mean, I think we should sort of move quickly away from people doing Vogue shoots and Vogue covers because I think it's lost all value completely. There was a day when you were thinking, God, if I get famous, I want to be on Vogue. Now it's like, I don't know. And one thing, because I'm going to ask Paris, start off with this one, how she and I spoke with this with a very, very good American journalist who normally covers soccer, like women's soccer, and she had a run-in once with Serena and said that she was in shock because she simply asked her that as a mother, she said, as a mother, I'd be worried about spending so much time on the road. How does that bother you? Or does that bother you? Or kind of like, what does it bother you? And I mean, Serena went off her. Like, how dare you say that? You think I can't be a mother at all? I was like, no, she's asking to, as my friend said, it was to kind of an empowerment because she's a working journalist, so she's on the road. You know, her husband, they split time, who's going to be home this week and next week and so on. But Serena has a reputation with journalists, and we just have a little taster of this as well, because it always is well worth to listen, especially the journalistic reaction, not just the one who's asked the question, but the ones who are sitting there as well.
Oh, I think that's a very negative thing to say. Are you serious? Okay, well, you should have been out there. That wasn't very kind. You should apologize. Do you want to apologize?
I just did. I'm sorry.
Okay, thank you very much. That was a. Why I didn't get, excuse me, can you talk louder so everyone can hear you asking me about my drugs?
Why you didn't get a TOE for it at the time?
Okay. I've never tested positive. I've always gotten a TB, so you should fact check that. In fact, no. I actually wasn't able to play the French Open, and I wasn't going to play unless I had a TB, because if you remember that year, I was incredibly sick. I don't know how I even won the match, and I said I can't. I literally can't play the final, but I need a TB to take a decongestant. So at the end of the day, that's what it is. But I've always been very happy to answer any question about that, and I've played over 20 years, and I've always been extremely honest. And that's one thing I take pride on, especially having a daughter and having a kid. I'm never going to be able to look my kid in the eye and say, Mom cheated or Mom did something like that. That is totally irresponsible. And even before that, I've always had that attitude. I've always been the kind of player that if you're going to beat me, you're going to beat me. And I'm going to congratulate you. But I'm never, ever going to take an advantage and try to have an advantage over someone else, because that's not who I am. And it'll never be who I am.
Serena, what is the most wonderful part of being a mom? Can you boil it down to a couple of things that you get particular joy from?
Okay, in both cases, one, the journalist apologized for asking a question about, like, it was a scrappy game, you weren't at your best. And the second one, they asked a question about, like, why did you get backdated TUEs? And I was like, the worst thing that any athlete can ever say, ever, because Lance Armstrong patented it, I've never tested positive. Pirate, what would you do in the situation? Because you're a top journalist with AFP, Agence France Presse.
Mm-hmm.
What would you do, and what would you do differently? And would you accept that from an athlete to turn around and sort of brush you off?
Very good question. Am I going to brush you off?
Why not? I'd be more. Yeah, you'd be more afraid of Serena, but I'm not.
I don't know. I think pretty bold to ask the question in the first place. Oh, when I say bold, I mean brave to face it up. Because I suppose you're never going to get the chance otherwise outside of a press conference. And yeah, you have to go with the flow, so to speak, go with the answer and accept it as she says it is, But, it's out there. The question's being asked, the answer's been given. And yes, Armstrong made himself a hostage to fortune, as we all found out. But Yeah, no, I mean, it's good that the question is asked, and she answered it in convincing fashion. Is that a brush off?
No, I think it's a great. No, I think you're dead right. I think you're right. She answered directly. Boom. She said what she had to say. Isol, just in that, when she's uses quite a lot, and she said it many times, like, I wouldn't cheat because I'm a mother. But in any case, I mean, no, I mean, in
Yeah.
any case, I mean, should she even have to be asked those questions?
Firstly, I think she should have to be asked those questions. I think there's a manner of you can reply to something. In just my opinion, I know you could be annoyed by a question. It happens to me daily in work. I get asked a question, I'm annoyed by it, but I have to stop and say how I answer this reflects on why am I getting so irate about something? How is it going to be perceived? And I dislike the way she answers it. You can answer emphatically and say, no, I have never cheated, without being aggressive or rude, I suppose. The other thing is the fact that you are a mother is great, but it doesn't prevent you from doing certain things. Like, it's not a carte blanche to say, like, you, if it was the other way around and a man was going, I'm a father, I would never cheat. Someone would go, all men cheat. They all cheat. Like, it's not, you don't need to reiterate that as your reason. I think what she could have said, or perhaps phrased it just to say, like, integrity really matters because I'm setting an example for my daughter. It's not by virtue of the fact that you have a child that you're not going to cheat. It's by virtue of what you want your child to learn. I think, as Pirate rightly said, fair play to the journalist asking. You're probably never getting near Serena again. But, you have to ask questions. That's what being a journalist is about. It's about asking a question. If it was a totally invalid question, like asking her, what's your golf handicap? That has nothing to do with her ability to play tennis. Where it's relevant to the subject, she has to expect the question.
Okay. All right. We're going to
Make his life if he wins.
Matter with these top players. Maria Sharapova is the highest earner in the history of women's sports, and she doesn't care. She just wants to win titles.
She's as very long here. That is a record. Wow,
that's right.
Service games. And so
4 aces in a row to go 2-all in the final set of the 2012 Wimbledon final against Radwanska from Poland, which she went on to win. It was an interesting enough Wimbledon that year, but Serena made it all her own. She wasn't a top seed, I think she's 5th or 6th seed. Okay, we're on to talking points. So, Isolde, I'm going to give you the floor first, and then Pirate, you had the floor to speak of the Commonwealth Games, that story, because I'm interested to hear it, because I've started to enjoy the Commonwealth Games again after a many-year absence. So, Isolde, it's over to you, and of course, it's about Tyson Fury, and I'll put up on the screen this is his statement, which contradicted the statement earlier that he was going to fight Derek Chisora again. So, Isolde, over to you.
So I think I've probably mentioned Tyson Fury's retirements before because there have been so many. Tyson is a fan of a retirement event. He likes to tell people he's retiring. I don't know if they sent him gifts, but he does it quite regularly. And then almost immediately after announcing his retirement, his habit is to then say he's going to fight someone, or he sees someone else having a fight announced and he points out that he will fight them afterwards. On this occasion, however, it appears that within the space of all of 7 days, actually less, Tyson has now reiterated that he is in fact retiring and thanked the various people, including his current coach or coach up until his retirement, thanked his wife, omitted to thank his former bestie and manager, Mr. Kinahan, somehow forgot about him in his list of thank yous. And then more importantly, and I think this is the bit that makes us kind of go, this could actually be it, he has relinquished the Ring Magazine belt, which means that that will be up for grabs for Usyk and AJ as they go on to fight next weekend in Saudi Arabia. So I think that puts to bed one aspect that up until now the view has been Tyson can say he's retiring, but the reality is none of the federations are going to move in to take his belts back, and the WBC in particular will let him have his belt for as long as he wants without defending it, because they all are a bit sceptical about his retirement. On this occasion, now it means the Ring Magazine belt will go to the victor next weekend, and I think that's a big thing. There was a very interesting interview in the last few days also by Eddie Hearn, which I think to an extent might have pushed the issue of the retirement. So Eddie Hearn did an interview with IFL TV, and he basically said during the course of it that, you know, every time there's big publicity about AJ, irrespective of what's going on with Tyson Fury in his career, if let's say he's retired, he suddenly has to come out and say, I'll fight him, or make an announcement about a fight. So it's almost like, you know, that petulant child who's like, they're talking about someone else, so I'd better intervene quickly and make all the focus come back to me. And that's the power of Tyson Fury, because he is the biggest, most recognizable, despite what anyone might think about AJ and AJ's huge deals. Tyson Fury is the loudest. He's the one everyone will stop and look at if he's in the corner shouting. So no matter what else is going on with other boxers. And I think perhaps that interview, coupled with the fact that to an extent, the Ring Magazine belt being gone has sort of made his mind up for him. He has now said categorically as of Friday, he on all of his social media platforms, that he has retired. So I suppose let's wait until we see what happens next Saturday night, because I can guarantee you, if AJ, by some miracle, because that's how I feel it will be, manages to beat Alexander Usyk, then Tyson Fury will be unretired by Sunday morning, because he'll want that fight against AJ, because he'll fancy his chances. I don't think he'd fancy his chances against a now beefed up Alexander Usyk, so I don't think he'd be going there.
Yeah, I think Usyk will dance on it. He's going to dance on AJ as well.
And he loves to dance. Go Google some Usyk dancing videos. I watch them daily.
Pirate, over to you. A bit of Commonwealth Games, of course, they just wrapped up last week. You were enjoying the well-earned rest after them. Your story.
Yeah, absolutely. So we'll go from a dancer to a walker. And I know walk wouldn't necessarily crop up on one's top list of 5 events to watch at any athletics meeting, really, with all due respect. But anyway, it just happened this Australian athlete, Jemima Montag, crossed the line. She won the 10K, I suppose you'd call it, round the track walk. She had a few tears, and, you know, it was a good performance, great performance. But it was what happened afterwards was extraordinary, because she was asked about this bracelet that she was wearing. And she said, oh, well, it belonged to my grandmother, who's called Judith, who died last year before the Tokyo Olympics. And the amazing thing about Judith is she is, well, with her, I don't know if her sister's still alive, the inspiration for Jemima Montag. And the bracelet has been cut up into 3 from a necklace that Judith wore, which she shared with her 2 sisters. This is Jemima with Piper and Amanda. Now, the reason being is that why she's the inspiration is it transpired is that Judith and her sister were in Auschwitz, and they went on the death march when they, you know, emptied the camp, or emptied apart from the sickest who they left behind. And so, you know, very young girls, I would imagine, at the time. And they, as Jemima Montag described it, they were in little sandals and they hardly had any clothing. And during this journey, just beyond belief journey, so Jemima recounted, she said, she, Judith, and her sister took waistbands and tied their wrists together and said, we are getting through this together or not at all. And I don't think one needs to add to that, but that's the inspiration for Jemima Montag, and saying that every kilometre treated as importantly as the next one, from her grandmother's experiences at the end of the war. And I just thought that no matter what athletic story or anything, that means so much more than, you know, I did it for so-and-so, etc. No, it was very moving anyway. And so that's what I'd like to talk. That's why I liked to repeat it.
Parag, can I ask you one thing on that? I mean, the Montag story, I'd only quite recently, a couple of days ago, had actually seen information about. But what I wanted to ask you was that in Europe at the moment, we see a lot of this banding around, and you're very, very good from your writings from World War II, from Lafarge. from also your awareness of, for example, Auschwitz and so on. Like you're very for example, on Twitter, you bring people's awareness to that, to my awareness, for example. With the and it's from, I will say, from both sides, both Russia and Ukraine, this idiotic thing of Nazi being thrown at each other. Do you think that demeans? This is away from sport, but in a sense. But when we talk about that, then and we see these touching gestures from Jemima Montag, for example. Does the abuse of the Nazi terminology or terms, or the like using it as a sort of a we're better than you kind of thing, or you're worse than us, does that take away from the impact that these people had in the 1930s and 40s?
Yeah, I think those terms, as they're used to, as you say, backwards and forwards, do, I mean, they're cheap, really, if you see what I mean. And when I say cheap, I mean the criticisms or the slangy matches about that, because when you stand or sit or read or whatever experiences that Jemima Montag talks about with, this is reality. This was, genocide, man-made killing machine, which, I don't want to do.
Oh, Barry's dropped it. Barry, you're still there, I hope. He'll come back in a moment. As he is coming back, this is the bracelet that she wore during. Oh, Barry's dropped it. We'll get him back now in a second. The bracelet that Jemima wore, so that Barry's mentioned. And because
sorry, I'm back.
Yeah, you're back in. Great. And
sorry about that.
As you put that, I put up on the screen a picture of Jemima and the bracelet, as you mentioned.
Brilliant.
You were saying that, like when we saw this, for example, the 1930s and 40s, this man-made, a killing machine. That went for me. When I hear genocide used, people don't understand what genocide means. What happened in, for example, the period of the Second World War was far beyond it.
Yes.
So, it's again. I think it's. We'll move on from it. I just think it's a lovely thing to bring up, and it's something that I think at this time in European history, something we need an awful lot more of, this understanding. And again, as you said, like to have your argument, but then come together afterwards. So it's this.
Yeah, of course. And I mean, just very quickly before we do move on, I just wanted to bring that up because I think also it's just, it's pretty extraordinary. And it's not often that you hear such stories in the mix zone, if you see what I mean, just after they come off the track, etc. And not bluntness, openness was admirable, and funny enough, very, very, very quickly, I've just used very, very, very quickly and used up more time, but is just how she looked into her grandmother's history after Tokyo last year with her aunt, because her grandmother barely talked about it. So it's all relatively fresh. And I just think also stories like that, they do highlight quite how horrific the reality was, and not, as you were saying, a slangy match between two governments.
There
we go.
Yeah.
Sorry.
No, and I think we solved the world's issues in just one point. I do. But again, I think it's when I see this rhetoric and this like going on, it drives me nuts, because I always boil it back down to when I hear football teams, and I heard this like with Ryan Giggs recently with his situation, and like Man U fans go, no, like no, Ryan didn't do it. Man City fans say, yes, he did it. It's like, if he was, when he's your own, no, he's fine. When he's with them, he's bad. And I won't sort of the phrase from wasn't it Nixon about he's our son of a witch. So so I think what I'm going to do is get off on quite a bit of fun for both of you, because both of you are sporting experts. I want you to. This is a very short quiz. Okay, there's only going to be 2 parts.
Oh, no.
Yeah,
Oh
no,
my
no,
God.
you're going to enjoy it. You're going to enjoy it. It's very easy. What you have to do is tell me, right, what happens next. And you both go, okay, we'll say Issa will go first, then Pirate, but you both have a chance with the same video. Tell me what happens next. Closest to it gets 10 points, okay? So you ready?
Yep.
You'll be fine. Trust me, don't worry. Here we go, all right? Okay, Isold, what happened next?
I'm going to say he gets up, falls, taking the referee out through the ropes with him.
That's really good. That's very good.
I hope it
Okay.
happens.
Pirate, what do you reckon happens next?
I think all three of them go out the ring, punching each other.
Right. So let's have a look and see.
On no basis of.
On what basis?
Absolutely none at all, except to be extreme.
Okay, here we go. This is a very good one. You will really not believe what happens next. I don't think either of you expected that one.
They basically knocked each other out.
Yeah. It was a double knockout. There you go. It was quite an unusual.
Good God.
So, Pirate, this one's slightly closer to your heart. I know Eastwood is also a fan of the sport of kings, but again, what happened next? Okay. Do you need to see that again?
Yeah,
we need to see that again.
Be careful, be very attentive. And my apologies for the music, it wasn't my choice. Okay, Pirate, up to you first. What do you reckon happened next?
I don't think I even saw that again.
Either did I.
Right. Okay, watch it. It's about 2 seconds.
What happened next? We get to see the video.
Okay, here we go. One more time. Just be very, very careful. So the guy in the green silks is giving it, and he's on the way to a win. What happened next?
Since I didn't see it, I think we're just going to guess randomly.
Yeah, very. Jockey goes over the rails.
Oh, okay. Not bad.
Saddle loosens. Yeah, I was going to have the jockey falling off. Jockey falls into the horse next to him.
Do you know what? Actually, so I think you're going to have to get the win today because you're closer to it. Here we go.
Oh my God.
Well done.
And I mean, the weird one, the horses was coming up on the rails, the inside rails, seemed to slow down to let the other horse go ahead. It was a very strange situation.
Wow.
No?
Extraordinary, huh?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, I know.
You wouldn't want to have punted on it.
So, Isel, you are you won today because you got kind of close. As you said, like the jockey came off and so on. So you got right.
It feels like
Definitely.
a strange victory, but like I'll go with that.
I concede.
Okay, very French.
Very.
I feel it would be remiss. It would be very remiss of me without Andrew on the line to let us go through the show without mentioning the implosion at United that is continuing. I just want to mention it. That loss yesterday. Let's just give it a minute to just sink into everyone's consciousness.
I predicted, because what people don't accept is Ralph Rangnick is still pulling the strings in Manchester United. He's still there. So, and Lokomotiv Moscow are now 5 games into the season, 3 draws, 2 losses, and they're absolutely in free fall. They're in the relegation zone. So on that note, I say, Isel, Cody, thank you very much for a brilliant show. Have a great week.
Thank you very much.
Pirate Irwin, I hope you're still there. She's gone. Oh, you're still there. It just went dark. So, Pirate, thank you so much for being brilliant this week. And folks, Pirate, what was the last?
Thank you very much, both of you.
Thank you. And
Thanks,
the name
Pirate.
of the last book, Pirate, so people can go and have a look at it.
The Serpentine Detective, and there's a bit of venom, but there's also, and it's not about the lake either. It's not the detective in the lake. No, well, thank you very much. I didn't expect to have to bore you for quite as long as this is the longest I've ever been on. So
this is never boring, Pirate. Never boring. It was
certainly worth losing to Isolde.
It was.
But thank you very much, both of you, and have a great week ahead. Huh?
Have a lovely week, all.
Thank you.
Take care.
Thanks, Pirate.
Thank you, Anna. Thanks, Isolde. Bye.
Thank you, Pirate.
Take care.
Pirate. Thank you. So, folks, we will say goodbye for tonight, and we'll be back, of course, next week, next Sunday from 9 p.m. CET. Hope you enjoyed tonight. We had some very, very good interaction as well from the viewers. Jack Nulty, thank you very much for taking part and for giving us feedback as well, because it's very important for us. So, until next week, take care of yourselves. And, of course, each other will go out with a little bit of Serena just to sort of round off our night.
Make his life if he wins. Matter with these top players. Maria Sharapova is the highest earner in the history of women's sports, and she doesn't care. She just wants to win titles.
She's just very long here. It is a record. Wow.
Wow, that's right.
Games.